15. Just, it's buffering away here, so.
Buffering?
Well, in a good way, I think.
Oh, buffering. I've not heard of a good way with buffering. Ooh, right. If everything goes dead, you'll know we've had a power cut here.
Yeah. It's flickering.
We just had a wee flash there. That would be a bit of a bummer. Jake would have to talk.
Add some excitement to the evening, maybe.
Exactly. An audience for Jake Spurway. better get some good stories ready.
Yeah. I've got a sign saying we're live on Facebook now.
Okay, do you think we're live?
I think so.
Everyone ready to go? Yeah. Okay. Well, a very, very warm welcome to everyone joining us this evening for our first in what we hope will be an exciting series of audience widths. We're absolutely delighted to have Rob Wainwright with us this evening. It is very much from call to call evening. We've got Graham Smith, our Director of Sport and Head of Rugby, with us this evening at Glenalmond. Myself, Carol McLaren at Glenalmond. And we've got Jake Spurway, very enthusiastic rugby player at Glenalmond in Braco. So 3 in Perthshire and 1 in the Isle of Coll. We're thrilled to have you, Rob. We're looking forward to the next hour. Quick note of housekeeping, we are recording this audience with, so we'll be able to share it afterwards with anyone who misses the live opportunity. And we've had a few flickers on the Isle of Coll in terms of power, so just a slight warning there that we hopefully we'll get through the next hour without losing Rob. So Rob, a very warm welcome. You not only were a pupil here at Glenalmond, you also grew up here at Glenalmond, and your family of course have a very long history with the school. Your dad, Jim, was a teacher here, still lives at just beside Glenalmond School. I think it was from 1962 to 1992 that he taught here. He was a housemaster at Kearney's, one of our 7 houses. And he was also sub-warden and went on to be warden. I know he's very, very proud of you. His only son, you were one of 4 with 3 sisters. We'll come to that later. We have
4 sisters.
4 sisters, oh my goodness. Yeah. Okay, well we have sought some good questions for you from one of your sisters. I'll not say which, yeah, I think your dad's actually managed to get himself hooked up on Facebook for the first time tonight to join us, so that's quite exciting. And of course your sister Sasha, who's a teacher here. Your dad, I think, has had 11 grandchildren all through Glenalmond College, which is excellent. And yourself, of course, having had 4 through
4 children. I'm not on the grandchildren yet.
4 children, yeah. Yeah, you're kind of my vintage. So I guess just to start us off, in terms of the format for this evening, very informal, very relaxed. Jake is going to be taking some questions as they come in on Facebook Live. And I'm not quite sure whether to call Graham or Smudge or Mr. Smith. We have got lots of pupils joining us this evening, so I think we're probably going to opt for a combination of all 3. But Smudge will talk through the rugby side of things. Of course, you had 37 caps and you were captain 16 times for Scotland. You also played for the British and Irish Lions. And we'll come to that later on, and also of course your choice to go and live on the Isle of Coll. I was fortunate enough to visit you out there a few years ago. I know it's a very special place, so we'll come to that later on. But to start off with, we have an amazing school. It's behind me in the image behind me there. We have, I think, the most beautiful, stunning school in the world. You have a great love of the outdoors. Do you think that is something that was kindled at Glenalmond? We've got 300 amazing acres here. do you think that your love of sport and the outdoors was very much kindled here?
Well, obviously I was brought up there before I even arrived, and in terms of being brought up with facilities, you know, the facilities we had available to us as we grew up were second to none. We had access to the amazing Perthshire countryside, but we also had squash courts, swimming pools, rugby pitches, etc., etc. And you know, it was an amazing place to grow up. And within, you know, the staff on campus, there was a lot of children of my age. So it was a sociable place as well. But it was almost impossible not to grow up with an interest in sport, or presumably go completely the other direction, which a few of my friends did, which is try and avoid sport at all costs. But anyway, I went down the sporting route, and when I actually, my bedroom looked out over, when I was living in Kenny's, looked out over the pitches there. So I do remember lying on my bed, jealously watching them at their rugby training at the beginning of the autumn term before I went off to school. And I was pretty taken with rugby from an early age, but didn't actually start playing until I was about 9. Which is early enough, I think. But undoubtedly, it's a fantastic school. What a situation! And back in those days, it was the whole freedom of being a child, full stop. Not just a child at Glenalmond, but everything felt a lot safer. Cars went a lot slower. You were expected to get on your bike and just go away for dockets at the weekend. And I know things are very different now, sadly, and health and safety has limited the freedoms of the pupils to a degree. But down by the river was a regular haunt for us, fishing, just exploring, going up first and third burn in October to see how big the salmon were up there. And all these amazing things we were encouraged to do, either by the staff or either by pupils further up. If it was the less legal stuff we were being encouraged to do, I'm not sure the staff ever encouraged us to go up third burn and grab salmon by the tail. But these things just got passed down from year to year, and it was undoubtedly a tremendous place to grow up and to be educated.
I asked one of your sisters what you were like as a little boy here, whether you were, you know, whether it looked like rugby was going to be your sport from an early age, what kind of, you know, young man you were. And I was told that there was an incident on Front Slope when you were skiing, age 4.
Yeah, my skiing career started age 3, I think, and almost finished age 4, where my snowplow went a little too far, and my skis were like that, and then went like that, and I fell forward. And the human body isn't meant to have the feet facing each other, and broke my leg. So my skiing career had a short hiatus. But in those days, Arnott Russell used to set up a ski tow. We literally had a small diesel engine at the top, which had a rotary arm on it, and a large cable that was braced at the bottom of sheet wash. And when you had snow like you do at the moment, skiing would become part of the sports curriculum. And we had the dry ski slope, which I don't think is used much anymore. Yeah, tremendous assets.
I asked your anonymous sister that I was speaking to who about, you know, whether you were you know, looking like you were going to be, you know, a talented sports person from the start, and she said actually far from it, you were a bit accident prone, that there'd been an incident at the Caledonian Canal on a family holiday.
Yeah, she's really pulling out all the stories where don't fall in the water, Rob, don't fall in the water. I hadn't even reached the boat before I fell off the gangplank into the water. So I was accident prone. I think I was very annoying when my father was housemaster at Kenny's. I think we were, while we annoyed the boys, we felt that we were safe. You know, we could hide back inside the door of the house, but every so often you get caught, and being thrown into the rhododendron bushes was a regular event. And I still meet people out and about, people who are in their 60s now, going, "Ah, yes, I threw you in the rhododendron bushes when I was at Coll." But yeah, I was a pretty annoying boy, I think. But if you've got 4 sisters, you got to be quite annoying to stand up for yourself. But in fact, the sister that you're talking about, who probably would be the one that teaches at Glenalmond, was the ball player of the family, and I think I was more athletic. And when we come on to rugby chat later on, I think it would be fair to say that athleticism rather than ball skills was probably my strength. But yeah, the ball player in our family was now teaches at Glenalmond, shall we say.
And I think we were all impressed when you joined, though, and we didn't realise you had artistic skills. So the picture behind you that we can see was an A-level Glenalmond piece of work.
Yeah, it's not mine. Not mine. No. Actually, we've got 2 A-level bits of work. We've got Natasha's is above me, and I think that's Cameron's to one side. So a very good art department at Coll through our kids' time there. So a couple of island scenes which we haven't let them sell. They'll stay on our wall, I think.
When I was speaking to your sister, I asked her about when you first it became apparent that you were really keen on rugby, and she said, actually, you know, you were the B team in the under-14, so it wasn't a steep instant ascent to you know rugby stardom. Yeah. Can you talk us through, you know, how you first got into the sport and how you worked your way up to the first team here?
Well, I think the key thing then was the age of puberty, and I was quite a late developer, and so everyone else was getting bigger and heavier, hairier and gruffer, while I was still small with a high voice. And when I came to Glenalmond, but I'd played 4 years of rugby at Lathallam, where I was before, and was mad keen on it. And when I got here, yeah, it didn't all. I didn't just walk into it, into the first team and work my way up. I was there or thereabouts, but Tony Hill and I, you know, he occasionally dropped me down to the seconds to keep me in check if I was getting a bit bumptious. But we'll come to it later on. But in terms of mental development and resilience to when you go on to the upper level of any sport, I think having had to fight your way up rather than coasting through can be a very useful asset. And I remember being told by Frank Dick, who was the British athletics coach, who was involved in coaching me when I was at West Hartlepool for a while, playing rugby down in the north of England, had something called the second place mentality. And he was specifically talking about individual athletes here, but he wanted people that hadn't been the best at school, hadn't coasted through university sport. He wanted people that were in second place and therefore worked and really had to develop a huge commitment and a real work ethic in order to go just that little bit higher than the people for which it was a natural talent. And they were the ones that eventually came through. So there are so many examples from my time that I can think of. And one good one is Kenny Milne, who was the hooker at playing for Scotland when I first got into the Scottish setup. And he played for the 6th Harriets, which being in the seconds isn't nearly as bad as his. He started in the sixth and eventually went on to, I don't know how many caps he got for Scotland, an awful lot. So development can be late, but it is a matter of having a working mentality and pushing. It is the more, putting the work in. The more you put in, the more you get out. And I'm sure I could come out with many cliches and sporting quotes, but it is self-evident that the harder you work at something, the luckier you get. I think that's one of the most famous quotes. But yeah, when I was at Glenalmond, I wasn't coasting into the first 15, that's for sure.
And how fondly do you remember the days when you were here and you were playing at niches, you were walking out, the bagpipes? How did that feel?
It was interesting to go back with children at the school because not a lot had changed. I think when my eldest son was first there, I think they were still doing Uggy, Uggy, Uggy. I don't know if that still happens. It's a rather bizarre ritual, but it was a ritual. I think Max Boyce probably started it, but one aspired to be shouting the solo Uggies, being the captain of the first 15, to be able to shout that round in what we call Mad Wifeys, but it's got another name now, hasn't it? Woodburn, yes, exactly. And to run on the pitch and the old wooden stand on the far side, which any FPs that are listening to this now will remember, built by Pub Adam. Quite how it never burnt down is a mystery to me. It was all wood and creosote, and I'm sure there was the odd illicit smoker that in there, but it is a miracle it never burnt down. But everyone sitting in there would stamp as we ran on the pitch, and it was an incredible sound box and quite a noise, and quite intimidating for the other teams. I found out subsequently when I was playing with people that had come and played against Glenalmond when they were at school. But it is, you said we have an amazing situation and a beautiful campus at Glenalmond, and I'm not sure which is better, the cricket pitch or Niches, the rugby pitch, but the view up north over the Glen, Slate Quarries and up to the hills beyond is, as you say, second to none. And what a glorious place to play. It was a little boggy up in the kind of top left corner back in our day, but it's all been drained now, and it's not so bad now. And it's a great pitch to play on, it really is. And happy to have played there, happy to have watched my children play there, and even go back and play the odd old boys game, which again, another thing that's succumbed to health and safety, sadly. But I think the kids enjoyed it, and certainly we, the OGs that came back, enjoyed it as well, because it's lovely to come back and play on the old pitch that you had so many fond memories of from your time at the school.
And you managed not only to focus on your rugby when you were here, you also, really managed to achieve in the academic side of things. You went on to Cambridge to do medicine. How did you manage to balance the two when you were here? With
great difficulty. So we were very lucky that we had what was called seventh term sixth form in those. So if you'd made a mess of your A-levels, or certainly hadn't done as well as you would have hoped, not talking about anyone particular here, but you had your get out of jail free card, and you could stay on for another term. And I'd certainly coasted and not put the work into my A-levels that I should have done. But this single term was a real eye-opener for me. And I think I probably learned more in one term than I had in 6 terms before. And just suddenly myself, and there was a large number of us doing the Oxbridge year in 1983. And I think we were just like sponges. We sucked the information out of the teachers, and teachers that we hadn't necessarily bonded with in a large rowdy class when you were 3-to-1 with them and really keen to learn. It was amazing, the difference. And yeah, so I was lucky to have the 7th term, and you know, sadly that's not available to people these days. And there is a rugby element to that as well, because there's, over the last couple of decades, maybe been a bit of strife with one of our neighbouring schools and how they have recruited rugby players, and obviously they've produced some fantastic rugby players, some who we'll be seeing at the weekend, I think. And it's, you know, there was a little whinging from over at Glenalmond potentially about it, and, you know, not necessarily without reason. But if we remember back when we had the 7th term 6th, we had a whole echelon of boys who were a year older that were available to play for the first 15. There was no age limit, so we had our time in the sun, and we made good use of it. And if I look back, I think David Soul and certainly Ian Morrison all went through the 7th term 6th, who also got played for Scotland, and you know, it was a fantastic thing, which is sadly no longer available, but you know, consigned to the bins of history now.
But you got off to Cambridge. How was that? I know you obviously you got a blue in rugby at Cambridge, as did your father before you. How was the Cambridge experience?
Well, Cambridge had always been the big ambition because of my father's blue there, and 2 of my sisters went to Cambridge as well, and got blues or half blues at sport. My eldest sister Holly rode in the boat race, the ladies boat race, self-evident, and Sasha got a half blue for cricket, I think. And my father got his blue in 1956. So there was a real family legacy there, and my earliest aspiration was to get to Cambridge and get a blue. So I arrived down there and injured my knee, which meant I couldn't play rugby. I'd arrived there hoping to get stuck straight in, wasn't expecting to get a blue in my first term, but was hoping that things would, you know, that I could get on the ladder, but I couldn't play at all because I had this problem with my knee. So I was chatting with a drinking buddy from another college who said he'd taken up boxing, and there was no one doing heavyweight. And so I turned up at boxing, and it was actually a real eye-opener, because all rugby training pretty much up until then in my career had been maybe a little bit of individual skills, a little bit of fitness, and an awful lot of unit skills, which is how things kept on going right up to the change to professionalism, where coaches, you know, coached lineouts and scrums and rucking, and that was about it. A little bit of team strategy. But I got to this boxing gym and we were absolutely hammered, because the main thing in boxing is to last the distance, and you have to be unbelievably fit. And it was just the most painful but inspiring set of sessions that I'd ever been through. Skipping and skipping and skipping till your forearms were burning away, but you just had to keep skipping, and sprinting while you're skipping with weighted ropes, where they put a bicycle chain around the middle of the skipping rope so that it weighed even more and therefore put more stress on your forearms. And it put a work ethic into my training, which you didn't really see in rugby. And we certainly didn't do that sort of training. We were still doing long distance runs as our preparation to a degree. And amateur rugby really was, you know, to a degree in the dark ages compared to where it is now. And Smudge will remember how it was back then, I'm sure, and know, you know, how the whole preparation of players is radically different now. But boxing was well ahead of the game, and I I was lucky enough to win the heavyweight spot in the varsity match, which wasn't hard because there was no one else there. And we hadn't beaten Oxford in the varsity match, which took place in early February, I think, for 9 years. And it was at Cambridge, and I was the last bout. The heavyweight was the last bout, and it was just in the Corn Exchange or the Guildhall. I can't remember which, but it was just a bear pit. It was a little square of light in the middle, and just an amphitheatre of wooden benches that went right up into the dark above. And I got led out, and it was 4-all. Oxford and Cambridge. There were 9 bouts, so it was all going to come down to the final bout. And I was lucky enough to put my opponent down in the second round. Neither of us were very good at boxing, but because of all the skipping that we'd done at Cambridge, I lasted a wee bit better. And to be honest, it's exhaustion that finishes you off. You'd have thought that 3 2-minute rounds could be the most tiring thing you've ever done, but undoubtedly it was. And I was lucky enough to come away to win it, and probably one of the most memorable sporting occasions I've ever been involved in, because it was such a grudge match, and to be involved in the crux bout to win the varsity match for Cambridge was massive. So I did another year of boxing after that, started playing rugby as well, and then left the boxing to concentrate on the rugby, and was lucky enough to get blues in my 3rd, 4th and 5th year. And then injury, a whole series of injuries in my 6th year, because I was doing medicine. I was there for quite a while. Stopped me getting a final one. But in those days, Cambridge rugby, the whole setup of rugby in England, there was no leagues, and therefore Cambridge were playing the top clubs. So we'd be playing a lot of the teams that people will see in the Pro 14, the Scarlets, Cardiff, and Swansea. We'd be playing Leicester, Wasps. We were an elite team, and our back line had, about 50% of the actual England team in it. So Cambridge always had some fantastic backs, and then a whole lot of students in the forwards whose only job was to provide just enough ball to our amazing backs. So it was a really entertaining way to play rugby, and I had 6 years of it. It was a bit of a shock to come out of it and go and play club rugby, which maybe didn't have as much dash and flair in it as I was used to from Cambridge rugby. But it was a fantastic time to play rugby. It's very different now. Again, just with, professionalism has changed so many things, and the varsity match has suffered as a result. And Cambridge and Oxford will get the odd sort of retiring rugby player like Jamie Roberts went and did some time, and people will go there for academic reasons and spend a year there. But we certainly don't have the amazing backlines that we had in our day. We had Rob Andrew in the team, Gavin Hastings, Clough and Sims were the England centres, Harriman an England wing, and Oxford had a whole load of, because of Rhodes Scholars, they had a whole load of South Africans and Australians and Kiwis. They had David Kirk, the World Cup winning captain, playing against us the first year that I played. So it was a very high profile thing to be involved in back then. And playing at Twickenham, probably the only happy games I've ever had at Twickenham, actually.
Well, I think at that point, I know Mr. Smith and Jake are both chomping at the bit to sort of ask you questions a bit more on your more recent sort of rugby career. But thank you for walking us through your time at Glenalmond, and I'll hand over to Smudge.
Evening, Rob. How are you doing?
Very, very good. Smudge, yourself?
Yeah, very good. It's great listening to you. It's great to see you. Just carry on from your rugby career at Cambridge. 92, you were selected for Scotland?
Yeah. I was interviewed last week about the differences. It's 25 years since the first professional match, Calcutta Cup, and they were asking how things had changed, and quite radically. And I got my first cap because Neil Edwards, a friend of mine, we'd just been to the Hong Kong Sevens together not long before and got on very well. And he very kindly feigned an injury, as often was done in the last 3 minutes of a match against Ireland, and limped off, melodramatically. And I ran on for, I don't think I touched the ball. I got my shorts done up by the time the final whistle went, but my socks are still around my ankles, I think. And trying to get out of one of these big, I know nowadays they've got zips and it's very easy to get out of the sub suits, but I hadn't really practiced it. And when there's 2 or 3 minutes left of a match and you're trying to get it off in order to get on the pitch to win your first cap, it's there was a lot of swearing anyway, but I got it off and got my 3 minutes, and subsequently was lucky enough to get into the side on a more regular basis after that.
Yeah, no, it was a fantastic career, and it took you to the British Lions as well. We had the great fortune, if you remember, you came and talked to the school team before we played at Murrayfield, and recounted the famous Jim Telfer speech. But you also told us what time of night it was, which was quite fun. Have you got any highlights you can look back on your sort of rugby careers? Any sort of high points that stand out at all?
Well, it's I can go back as far. I remember some of the most exciting things that happened when I was at school. If I just go back, was having David Leslie come and coach us. So another iconic Scottish player, been involved in the 1984 Grand Slam, but he was. This was obviously before that. He was, playing for Scotland and came along and coached us, and it was hugely exciting to get some input. And he was a pretty brutal guy, and really put us through our paces, and had us, there was a lot of physical contact involved anyway when he came along. So it was lovely to come back and do the same. And one tries to be memorable. I remember taking the boys at pre-season down to the river and doing weights with stones from just above White Bridge there. And I think they all enjoyed it. So, and I certainly enjoyed coming back. But as to great memories from international career, so many. I could highlight from what we've been saying, playing in I think it would be 25 years ago now. I think the back row was Ian Morrison and myself from Glenalmond, and Eric Peters. We'd all been at Cambridge, so it was deemed the most intelligent back row in world rugby. But 1996 was actually probably my favourite season with Scotland. I'd just newly been made captain. Not a huge amount was expected of us. We won over in Ireland our first match, I think, and then we played France, who were heavily tipped to beat us at Murrayfield, and we played extremely attractive rugby. Gregor Townsend had just been moved to fly half, and kind of made the position his own, from Craig Chalmers, who'd been in there for quite a while before. And Craig's game, Craig was a very good attacking player, but he was an exceedingly good kicker as well. Gregor's first instinct was always to attack. And so we played a very fluid and entertaining type of rugby, the sort of rugby that I enjoyed playing through all my time at Cambridge. So, and there was just a real feel-good factor to the team, and we kept winning matches. And the French game is one of my favourite games, where Michael Dodd scored all the points with 2 tries, and the French had come across billed to play attractive rugby and didn't really turn up, and it was left to us to play all the rugby. And then we went down to Wales, and getting a win down in Cardiff was incredibly difficult, but our record against Wales at that time was probably about 50-50, but we knew it'd be a big ask to win down there, and we scraped it. And the next couple of years, Wales scraped it against us, and in fact they beat us quite heavily a year later. But it was there or thereabouts always. But we came away with a win from that match, and then we had to face England for the Grand Slam decider, which was tremendously exciting. We'd actually played England a year before then at Twickenham on a Grand Slam decider, but I don't think we really felt that we were in a position to beat them. But we did genuinely think we were in it. We beat England in '96. Sadly, I was taken out of the game by my good friend Jason Leonard. Luckily for him, it was all hidden behind other people, and none of the camera angles could show any dirty play. But I was left lying on the ground, trying to remember anything. And given I was captain and running the line out and a bit of an information hub and decision-making hub, it was a bit of a loss. And so we never got our Grand Slam, but we had a hugely enjoyable season, and went and toured New Zealand after that. And we knew we were up against a chap called Jonah Lomu, and so we prepared. We trained hard to cope with him, and lo and behold, they produced someone else called Christian Cullen, who was even more of a try machine, and and I think he scored 4 tries against us in the first test. And I think we certainly in '95 and '96 we played the All Blacks 3 times and put some big scores up against them, but they put some bigger scores up against us, and but they were tremendous games of rugby, most enjoyable.
No, brilliant. You talked about Gregor Townsend and his attacking play, and it's obviously Calcutta Cup this weekend. Do you think the way he played is reflected in the way the team's playing, or the way the team's trying to play? Do you see that? Well,
it's come and gone a wee bit. When Gregor first took over, certainly it was a very fluid type of rugby that he was promoting. Over the last season and a half, probably we've seen our defence tightened up, and we had extremely good defence, but we've kind of lost a bit of the attacking flair, and it's been difficult because at the end of one Six Nation, you'll think we finally got a midfield that really threatens, and then we've gone through so many centres. We know we've got some good fly halves. We know we've got a good back three, and just getting the centres to fire, and we seem to have so many centres, but they all seem to be pretty injury prone, and some of them have disappeared off the screen. People like Bennett, Mark Bennett was 3 or 4 years ago was just a shoe-in. He was a fantastic player, and it may well be the attrition of injuries in the professional game, and if we talk about what makes a player or a team click, I think I use the expression form. And when you've built up some really good form and you've got a number of games where you've really played well going into a big game, it gives you a huge confidence and lift, and allows you to try things and do things that you wouldn't necessarily have the confidence to try. And I think we've possibly seen that with some of the centre pairings, where if you think what Hugh Jones was doing 2 years ago, or 3 years ago, would it be? Yeah, 3 years ago, with these amazing runs, and we've just not quite seen Hugh back where he was. And now we've got a new centre pairing, I think of Harris and Redpath, and it would just be lovely to see that midfield really cement, because we know we've got everything else we need out there. And we know coming back to the Cambridge analogy, if the pack can produce 35-40% good quality possession and get the backs flowing, things could happen. But you know, it's been a bit stuttery of late, but we only, you know, if we look back a year, well, even 11 months as the Six Nations went on, there was a huge amount of confidence building there. And then obviously COVID's kind of created this huge hiatus in the run of form that we'd been looking at. And we go into the Calcutta Cup not really knowing what we're going to see. We've got a third of the England team haven't played a match since December, which is almost impossible to believe, isn't it? It's February now. But from our point of view, you know, that's great. We needed a lot of pluses. I think the Glasgow and Edinburgh teams have been stuttering badly throughout the start of this season. So I think we need things like the problems England have been having to give us the lift and give us the confidence to go down there and compete, because it's a tremendously hard place to win, Twickenham. But a lot of these players will have played 2 years ago in that staggering game, the 38-all, which, you know, must rank as the best game of rugby I've ever watched. I'd like to say watched. I didn't watch much of it because during the first half, I just cycled down from Murrayfield to Edinburgh, 500 miles in 48 hours. I wasn't in particularly good nick, and it looked like we were on for a humping. And we were literally about 35 minutes in. We were heading for the door, saying, "Come on, let's just go and get some sleep." When McAnally got the interception and unbelievably wasn't tackled and scored a try, and you just thought, "Oh, better stay and watch this one," and little knowing what was going to happen in the second half. And I think the England team just started playing champagne rugby, and when you start playing champagne rugby, you start concentrating on the attacking and trying to get tries and having a bit of fun, and you forget about the really important part of rugby, which is the defending. And I think there was a back pass, I think it was from Slade to May or something like that, that resulted in England's last try. And that was the moment that, in retrospect, when I watched the highlights the next day, I said, that's the moment where England lost this game. Well, they didn't in the end lose it, they got the draw, but they lost the Calcutta Cup. They started playing champagne rugby, and you can't do that. You've got to keep going with all your duties, not just concentrating on the attacking side.
Definitely, it was certainly edge of your seat stuff, and you need to get the grunt done. We'll bring Jake in a minute because he's got a question relating to that, to do with the Calcutta Cup. And you know, Twickenham's going to be empty at the weekend, but you said you'd cycled there, and that reminded me, you know, you're the driving force behind the Doddy Aid that's going on at the moment. And it's a fantastic effort that you've done and put in on behalf of the legend of Doddy Weir. There was a question came in earlier. Have you got any other things planned? I mean, I know you'll be announcing the total soon at the weekend, which I think has exceeded all expectations, seeing on your social media the other day. Is there anything else in the pipeline we can look forward to?
I think I'd be very popular with my wife and family if I was to suggest I was going to do anything else. Back in sort of early December, I looked at this and thought the timing could be quite good. It was actually an idea I had for 2 years ago, which luckily I didn't run with then, but I thought, well, maybe this could be the time. And I quite like to do something each year, and because of COVID, it didn't look like the Murrayfield to Twickenham ride was necessarily going to be possible. So I just thought, we'll give it a go. And I remember saying to Romaine, my wife, it'll only take, you know, about an hour a day max. No, it's not been like that at all. But it's been a massive roller coaster ride, and hugely exciting to be involved with. And I think everyone seems to have enjoyed it, which has been fantastic. And it's hard to get your head round 1 million. I know it's just a number in some ways, but it's a very iconic number. And by about 10 days in or 2 weeks when we hit 500,000. As soon as we hit that, I thought, no, we've got to go for it. And I wasn't sure how we were going to do it, but one of the team, one of the management team, Mark Bowman, came and said, why don't we do this and put an event within an event? So we did the World in a Day, which was trying to get each of the 5 district teams to get 80 people or 80 teams of people to cycle 240 miles and thereby replicate what Mark did, where he did round the world. He did an average of 240 miles over 80 days. So we did that, and that was a massive filler and must have brought in 150,000 or something like that, which really lifted us. And Romain and I were on the calculators about 2 days ago, adding up again, going into the Just Giving, saying we're so close. And actually the final edition where we went over, I was about to do a post and put a video out saying we are on £999,342. Come on, let's just a little bit more fundraising and we can get this. But actually we added it up and we were £1,097,000 or something like that. So it was a big cheer, and it's been a lot more relaxed since then. So.
I imagine it's a fantastic cause and a fantastic reason you're doing it, and it really galvanised. I don't think there's anybody in Orkney who's not doing it at the moment. They're taken to it.
Orkney have certainly, and Shetland, to be fair, have really embraced it, and it's very easy to galvanise support when you have an inspirational figurehead like Doddy, and it is, and these things don't just happen. There's a huge web of support all over Scotland, as Orkney has shown, and the Orkney link has come from Aberdeen and Stonehaven, where they did a lot of fundraising, but a lot of people from up there are. Sorry, I've just been delivered some oysters. Oh, lovely. I'm not sure I'll have a chance to eat them, but it's very exciting.
That's your
4 Coll oysters. So can you ask quite a long question, Smudge, now?
What I'll do, Rob, is I'll introduce Jake while you try and sneakily get some oysters in you. Jake is pupil at the school, and he is the latest of our pupils who's now a Scottish Rugby Academy supported player. So a man who's very firmly following in your footsteps and some of the boys who've gone before him. Jake's been getting used to Facebook, so I don't think he actually has it himself, but he's been getting used to it and watching the questions come in this evening. So Jake, it's over to you, my friend.
Hello, Rob.
Hi, Jake.
It's nice to speak to you. Yeah, I've got quite a lot of questions here, really, from various different people. But my one really relating to this weekend, and one of my friends, Louise, asked the same sort of thing. It involves intimidating crowds. And do you remember any sort of atmosphere that you were quite intimidated by, and how did it feel, and how did you manage to deal with that, if so?
Well, the crowd is such a huge weapon, and rugby, possibly more than most sports, has a huge home advantage. And Twickenham was the most intimidating ground. Possibly Ellis Park in South Africa would be up there with it. But Twickenham wasn't a fun place to play because the crowd was so intimidating. But I'd obviously played varsity matches there and Army Navy matches there, which were a great event every year, still are, and had far better memories. And there was much I loved about Twickenham, but the crowd at Twickenham for a Calcutta Cup was very hostile. And how do you deal with it? You've just got to concentrate on your performance and concentrate on your game and try and block it out. And there is nothing more pleasurable than a silent away fixture. And obviously it's a given against England, because there's there's no crowd. But I'm trying to remember which match it was. It may well have been Wales, the Welsh match I referred to 25 years ago, where we shut the Cardiff Arms. I think it was still the Cardiff Arms Park in those days. We shut it up. It was absolute silent. And the Welsh are tremendous at celebrating when things are going right, and they are the most miserable bunch when it goes wrong. And it is a huge. It is, you know, you've really done well if you can shut the crowd up when you're playing away. And sadly, I never had that pleasure at Twickenham, but obviously it's a given. It's a given with no crowd this week.
Excellent stuff. Jake, keep going.
Yes. Talking about Twickenham and the lack of the crowd this weekend, quite a few people have been asking for your predictions on the score, and who you got your money on?
Oh, his head and his heart, and it's impossible. It's impossible to come. I'll have to have an oyster to fuel my brain while I'm thinking about that. So, they may look about their oyster tempura rather than the raw oyster. They're very good. But what are the key things? We've discussed some of them already. There's not been a lot of match time for a large number of England players. They're missing the first and second choice front rows, as far as I can see, or certainly the props. So there's a lot of people missing or short of match practice in the England team. But the depth of player, the depth of talent England have is so massive that there may be even better players who've been kept out that may appear. So it's a bit of an unknown. Scotland, as I said, Edinburgh and Glasgow haven't been on top form. There's possibly confidence issues there. I think they've turned the corner a wee bit recently, and they've had some wins. So hopefully that'll help. And obviously a significant number of the players do not play up here anymore. And our top players are generally getting paid by clubs out with of Scotland now, which is the system that is inevitable, but in some respects works well. If Finn Russell and Adam Hastings are playing elsewhere, we're going to have to find two more fly halves. And what position do you play, Jake?
Me, I'm second row or a back row. So. All
right. Okay. Well, you're not going to fill the fly half, but you're in a proper position there then. So, but we've got a lot of players playing down at Exeter, and obviously Racing with Finn, who are in great form at the moment. So, and it's up to those players to really lift the mood of the team. And I'm a huge fan of Stuart Hogg, and I know there's a lot of debate about whether a fullback makes a good captain. I played under Gavin Hastings from fullback, and he captained us for 2 seasons, and it worked brilliantly. You just got to run forward and interact quite regularly, and Gavin did that, and you can see Stuart doing it. And I think there's a real will to him. If you think of the great captains that have played against and for, Martin Johnson would be a good example. Martin never said a huge amount, but he just did it, and he was just this force of will who just believed he could win and was not to be denied. And that, if you can bring that mentality to a team as a captain, I think Stuart, it's a very different position from a second row in Martin Johnson to being fullback. But Hoggy is so important to the side, and I'm a huge fan of his captaincy. And I remember back to my own days, and it ties in with having a Redpath in the team, is that concentrated on a happy season in 1996, but they didn't all go swimmingly right. 97 was a very difficult year. I was coming back from injury and struggling to get to that form that I referred to earlier on. And we were losing matches. And I remember Brian Redpath, father of, quietly saying to me, you don't try and, don't put all your energy into the team, put a lot of the energy into you, because what we need is you performing well, and then that's going to help us more to perform than you putting all your energy into trying to get the team well, so playing well. So hugely important that the captain is in good form, not just leading by example, but then has the confidence from what he's achieving on the pitch to be able to lead well and inspire the players. And I think Hoggy fits the bill on that perfectly. But yeah, I'm going back to our centre. We've got a new Redpath playing now, so I don't follow a huge amount of rugby. A lot of what I'm talking about is theoretical from my background in the game, but I'm tremendously excited to see another son of someone I played with. And when we were cycling 240 miles at the weekend, we had a large number of people come and entertain us on a big Zoom call, and Gavin was there, and he's talking about setting up a father and son club for all the different fathers and sons. I think there's Sellers out there, there's Entermax, now we've got Redpaths, Hastings, and it's wonderful to see the next generation coming through.
Brilliant. Jake, have you got one more?
Yeah, there was.
Go on.
I've got the last question that I had was from a friend called Josh, and he wanted to know if there was any opponent you really didn't like facing, and why in particular.
Well, through the the really happy years of my career, when you're on top form and you feel that you could earn a place in any team, one didn't fear, one actually looked forward to playing against the good players. But it was certainly, in terms of Calcutta Cup history, I think Dean Richards would rear his head as being a man who could play a type of rugby that we just were not equipped to defend against them. Something called a rolling maul was just emerging through the mid-90s, and big up your jumper players were ideally suited, and mobile small Scottish packs weren't ideally suited, and the laws seemed to be stacked against us. If you did anything that looked vaguely like it was collapsing, it was a penalty. So I think in 96 we lost the game. I say I think because I can't remember anything of the game, which is quite topical now with concussion injuries in rugby. But I'm happy to be smiling and laughing about it because I'm vaguely compos mentis still. But Dean Richards stuck the ball up the jumper, and they rumbled us and slowed our game down, and won on kicked penalties. And we look at the game. I think we looked at the autumn cup. Is that what they called it? Which was some of the most dismal rugby I've ever had the misfortune to watch in terms of what has happened to rugby. Everyone started playing like Ireland, and Ireland, are extremely efficient at winning matches, but they're precious short on entertainment in many of them. And the horror is that everyone started playing that way in the Autumn's Cup, with the box kick, the incessant kicking, and the removal of risk from the game. And I'm sure it will not be like that for the Six Nations, because I know there's a lot of really good rugby out there. And after the last World Cup, I kind of hoped that the big player was maybe, might be phased out a wee bit. It was great to see New Zealand and Japan playing a very dynamic game at the last World Cup. But we seem to, have gone back to big, lumbering, short, not particularly interesting to watch, hit after hit after hit, in an effort to try and break defences down. And unfortunately, defences are far better than the attacks these days. And the Autumn's Cup was a kind of nadir in the flow of rugby. And I had the pleasure of watching my One Lions test, which was the third test in '97 against South Africa, which I'd never seen before, and I actually watched it a few weeks back. And a number of things struck me. Having not watched something that you only remember snippets of memories from, one thing is that my snippets of memories where I thought I'd done pretty amazing things, they weren't that amazing. And the other thing, the other really great thing that came out of it, it was one of the most enjoyable matches I've watched. Hugely entertaining. We were attacking all the time. Everything was attack, and destructured. Everything was destructured. Whereas now there's so much structure in defence, it's hard for attacks to break it. But everything was destructured. And there's a lesson for Scotland. We will play well if we can destructure the England defence. And the key these days is to have your hoggies running at your props and your second rows, because that is the only, that's one of the only ways to make a break these days. So hopefully we'll see lots of jinky backs running at tired props. But there is one way that we could make the props more tired, and that's to leave them on for the whole game. But that's a political element that I've been banging on for a long time, and it was great to see Nigel Owens coming out supporting that, getting rid of substitution, or certainly scaling it back to try and make players more dynamic and take a bit of weight off them if they've got to carry that weight for 80 minutes, not just 45. So.
Well, I think at that point, I see our time, we are on pretty close to the hour. I know please don't hold back with the oysters, Rob, but just please go ahead with them. But I don't think—
I've only got one left.
Okay. I mean, I know, we've talked a fair bit just now about the technical side of play in rugby, but the friendship side, I think, having heard you speak before is something that was so important to you and still is. Is that something that you can tell us about? How much you're out on the Isle of Coll now? How much do you manage to keep up those friendships, and how important are they? And if you could just tip your screen a little bit, Rob, because we're seeing a lot of the Glenalmond A-level art. But yeah.
Okay. I say quite topical. Doddy and I have got so much history together, and I don't think I'd be doing these things, setting up things like Doddy Aid for every player I've played with, but certain people you just really find a common touch with, you just click with. And Doddy, I think one of the things that makes Doddy such an attractive character is one of the things that has made him such a good friend, is that he tries to find humour where he can. He will knuckle down and be serious when he has to be, and that's you have to do that to have played international rugby as long as he did. He was there for an awful long time, but there's always a bit of mischief, and there's always a smile nearby, and a tremendous chap to spend time with, both on and off the pitch. And that friendship has lasted. With we don't see each other very often, but we are bound together by a very strong bond that you get from playing international rugby or playing any rugby together. If you play any team sport, not just rugby, with people for a long period, you do develop particular bonds. And if you then go on to play, to go on a Lions tour together as well, it further strengthens those bonds. But these same bonds I have to, a greater or lesser degree with people I played on niches with when I was at school, people I played through the rest of my career, whether it was at university or at club level. And rugby is an extraordinary game. In many ways, it caters for all shapes and sizes, which is hugely important. So it's available to everyone. It caters for both, I think we say genders nowadays, don't we? Both genders. So we've got, you know, ladies rugby is making leaps and bounds at the moment. And it produces this amazing family. And when we talk about the way Dodier took off, it was because it went out through the rugby family, out into the grassroots of the communities that are bound together by rugby in your Orkneys, your Stonehavens, your Isle of Colls, your, you know, all the little corners, your Langhams. You know, I'm thinking of all the different places that have appeared on our various social media streams, with people doing amazing things, just very ordinary things, but amazing things, because we're all doing it together in a common cause. And I think that is a particularly special part of rugby. And the great thing is that it's a free ticket when you go abroad, pretty much into a community. And we hadn't touched really on touring, but one of the great things about any sport is to go and visit other countries, other cultures with it, and to have a free ticket right into their communities, because you're bound together by a love of, in this particular instance, rugby. And that is a huge privilege. And one, I think that there, in the timetable, there was a question, what advice would I give people? And well, make use of the privileges. It is a huge privilege to be at a school like Glenalmond, and it's a huge privilege to go on tour, on a rugby tour. Make use of those privileges and get every last ounce of experience you can out of these things. And don't try and live life on a Game Boy or whatever it is nowadays. There's so much life, so much experience. You're offered a lot of things at Glenalmond. Try them all, and you may find you're exceedingly good at one of them, but you won't know if you don't try them. And yeah, do things.
Well, I mean, that's wonderful advice. I think very briefly then, just to wrap up, life on Coll, just briefly to touch on it. I was fortunate enough to fly out and interview you a few years ago for a Scotch Beef campaign, and it was a very memorable trip in many ways. The pilot, I remember, was called Angel. I don't know if he still flies a little prop plane over from Oban.
She's retired now, yeah.
Okay, and I remember on arrival at the airport, you'd offered to come and collect myself and the photographer with all these kits, and you arrived in your quad with a trailer on the back. I don't know if you remember that, which had a sheep in it as well. It had a single ewe in the trailer, so we had we clambered in there, and you know, you showed us the island, and what was very clear was your love of the island and your love of farming. We did have a question, just what is it about island life and farming that you love so much?
Well, it's all your father's fault, Carol, because he gave me my first agricultural job, working at Tulkin Farm, which is no longer the farmland's still a farmland, but the steading is now a whole load of houses. But that was my first job when I was about 15, I think, doing the winter feeding, which your father kindly gave me. So it ties in quite nicely. But you, at the very beginning, we were talking about the great outdoors and what Glenalmond offers, and I had to make some decisions. I have a huge love of the west coast of Scotland, not just the islands, but the whole western seaboard, and I was very keen to come and live here. But doing medicine, it's basically you either work in a hospital or you become a GP, were pretty much the options that were open. And I wasn't particularly fond of hospitals, and because I like being out. And I did both my electives working in Ardnamurchan, which is just the closest part of the mainland to here, and realised that being a GP on the west coast of Scotland was a huge amount of work in the summer, because instead of just looking after 800 people, you had 3,500 tourists to look after as well, and was very quiet in the winter when there wasn't necessarily as much to do. So that decided me that I'd have to head on to another career. And when we were lucky enough to get the farm over here, we didn't know a huge amount about farming, despite the best endeavours of Mr. Sinclair, who I think was working for your father at the time. But the farming community has been tremendously kind in their advice, and so freely will they offer their advice. Almost sounds bad, that, doesn't it? But they're very free with their advice, and I mean that in the kindest way. And we've learned, and we've gone from looking at it as a potential way to make money to having a real passion for livestock, and particularly cattle. I absolutely love cattle, and it's a very engrossing way to make money, make a living. Sorry, not make money, and it's a great lifestyle. It can be really tough. I was dosing sheep about 3 hours ago in about a 30-mile-an-hour northeasterly, and my hands were absolutely freezing. But I could have nice warm hands sitting in an office and not have the quality of life that I do here. One has to mention again, family. When you do live out somewhere as remote as this, the community, there is a very strong community here. And this new medium that we're on now, Zoom and social media, means it's a lot easier to keep in touch with people from all walks of your previous life, which is fantastic, particularly if you live on an island. But it's hugely important that you have a strong home life as well. And I'm very lucky that Romain shared my dream, and my kids love coming back to the island, and I cannot be luckier. And I have one of my kids now poking his nose in here. So, but
very, very much appreciate. We have overrun our hour that we said we would take up of your time. You regularly come back to Glenalmond. You were back here last year before we did the 24-hour cycle for Doddy. You inspired us then. You're a fabulous ambassador for Glenalmond College. We are delighted to have you, and to have you inspiring our pupils. And this evening, I think you've inspired all of us. We wish you all the very best, and your family with your life over in Coll. We hope that you'll be back here seeing us before too long. So
got to wait for grandchildren now.
Well, we can sign them up. I know our bursar, if he's listening, will be delighted to accommodate any. We take registrations at a very early stage. So thank you, sincere thanks to you, and our very best wishes to Romain and all the family over on Coll.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure. Lovely chat with you, Jake, and I hope you get some rugby, and COVID lets you on a pitch sometime soon. And likewise, I'm sure Smudge is pretty frustrated not having any rugby, any kids to coach. But it's been my pleasure, and always great to have links, to have a chat with people from Glenalmond. It's been so much part of my life from day one, and still is hugely important. I can almost see my sister's house in your photo behind you. Can't quite, but it's an amazing place, and you're all very lucky to either be there or to teach there, even though at the moment you're not able to be there.
Well, thank you. And we have an open day coming up on March the 13th, an online open day for anyone who would like to join us. We'd love to see you. And thank you to everyone who's sort of tuned in this evening. We'll have the video of this evening's audience available online shortly. And good evening to you all.